please like our video and subscribe to RotoWire. Then go to rotowire.com/pod for a free 10-day trial.
Welcome back. Thanks to Underdog for your sponsorship. Welcome back to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Jeff Erickson here with Fred Zinkie. Now that we covered breaking news, let's talk a little bit about TGFBI. It's draft season. Recently wrote about some observations from TGFBI and from RazSlam. We'll cover those real quick before we hit on the NL West. TGFBI really illustrated to me the importance of draft position. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but when you're early, you talked about it in the context of Ozzie Albies, you're being middle or late, just not available to you. Say you got an early pick and you don't jump to like DeGrom or Cole early at 1 or 2 or 3. You really got to think ahead about your pitching plan. Do you double up in rounds 2 and 3? Do you take what's available in 4 or 5? Do you wait even longer? How do you want to tackle it? It's something, especially in a 15-team league, you really have to think it through ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the doubling up is the big decision, right? Like some people will go like risky and go start with 3 hitters. But if you don't want to be that guy, it's are you going to double up or are you going to just take one on the 2-3 turn and then kind of have someone probably who you have your eye on for the 4 or 5 turn, assuming you're trying to draft with some balance. Now, TGFBI is an overall, so it does open up all sorts of wacky things if you want to try to do them. It depends how straight up you want to play it. Do you want to try to just win your league and do well, and if you don't win the overall, that's fine, but you could do something wacky in an overall, right? And you know that as well as anyone from all the RotoWire overalls, but like you could take 6 hitters to start your draft and then take all your sleeper starters and see if you're right. And if you're right, maybe you win the overall or vice versa. So, but if you want to play it straight and balanced, then I think the big decision if you pick early this year is, are you taking DeGrom or Cole? And if you're not, are you going to double tap on the 2-3 turn?
Right.
And
and I think some of that's about supply. I mean, if you have certain pitchers you're a little wary of, like you may not want to take Max Scherzer there, or you may not want to take Brandon Woodruff. Know where you're cut off, because in some leagues it's going to get pushed a lot more. LABR, it looked like it was going to really punish you for not taking a pitcher at the 1-2 turn, and yet you got Woodruff and Gallen. And this is the point where you kind of mock me now for taking Woodruff at 3.2 in mine, but I would have taken Gallen, but Gallen went right at the turn in between my Kershaw and Woodruff picks. But had Woodruff and Gallen both been gone and that was it, I would not have pushed up Maeda, who went at 3-1. Would not have pushed up Snell and Glasnow. I would have taken what would have come. I would have taken a closer sooner too, as a result of that. I'm certain. One decision there dictated one later on. Because I had 2 starters at 5-2, I took Luke Voit instead of taking Liam Hendriks at a pretty reasonable price at 62nd overall pick. And that spurred my approach to saves. Every time you make that conscious decision, it kicks that another one down the road, and you kind of have to think ahead. Okay, all right, I know I'm not going to get these guys in this tier. What are you going to? You better be prepared to handle that afterward.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I look at your team so far, and you're getting near like close to round 30 now. So you definitely, after you didn't take a closer in round 5 and took Luke Voit instead, then you really went without closers. Was that something you planned on doing at the start, or was that just you are near a turn? So was that just kind of like when they came back on the 7-8 turn, a lot of them had gone. When they came back on the 9-10 turn, a bunch more had gone, and you just said, I'm not reaching?
Well, remember, it's like 6-7 turn and 8-9
Oh, yeah, sorry,
turn.
6-7,
Yeah, so at 7-2 was the 5-2 and 7-2 were the demarcation points. I was really thinking about Hendricks at 5-2, and then he went at 5-5 instead. And I just remember I had just done a 12-teamer where I had taken Hendricks early, and I liked that build. But in a 15-team, you're giving up so much more. And remember, that's 20 more picks are going before your next pick. And I already had 2 hitters at that point. It's like, I need the hitters. I really need the hitters here. And same thing at 7-2. That's where I really made the conscious decision that, okay, I'm really going to wait on closers. Because I know this whole next tier is going to be eviscerated by the time it gets back to me in the 8th round. So as it was written, so it came to pass. I knew that was going to be the case. The round 7 and 8 were just going to be pounded with closers. I wasn't going to, and I don't feel comfortable paying that 9th round price on guys like Nick Anderson and Kirby Yates or Craig Kimbrell or anybody else in that range. So I just knew at that 7 pick, like, I'm really going to wait, because I view like Jordan Hicks just as much as I view, Alex Colomé. It's like, might as well wait the 4 extra rounds. So that's
Swanson was really your decisive move. If you wanted to, you could have taken Rosenthal, who we just talked a few minutes ago about how much you like him this year, or you could have taken Iglesias or Presley, but you could have gone for someone who you really feel pretty good about, I would say, and you knew none of them are coming back at the end of round 8. So Swanson was your guy. You decided you'd rather have him. I could see it, like looking at your team up to that point. You don't have a ton of steals. Like Acuna's got a ton of steals, but Bregman not so much, Voigt not at all, Gurriel only a little bit. So you got a bit more of a balanced contributor there with Swanson.
Right. And look at the shortstops we're running out at that point. And the next couple of shortstops you go down to Semien and Carlos Correa. Yeah, I think Swanson's a clear demarcation point. You may argue about that. List doesn't like him. I know that, but I could have just waited on Semien, I suppose, instead. But I'm not a big Correa guy. I'm not a big DD guy. No. I'm not, and then, and I think there's something to be lost by not having one of the better shortstops.
Yeah, I like Swanson. Swanson was probably my number one guy last year. I think I had him in Tout, I had him in LABR, I had him pretty much everywhere. I was really bullish on him. It was back to that 2019 season where he started off really well and then dealt with an injury in the second half and did nothing. So I was kind of big on him. I think the Swanson pick's fine. It's just a roster construction thing. Right. And now, but I think, again, going back to the overall component, now you've set yourself up. If you're right on Jordan Hicks, who you took in round 14, and if you're right between Drew Pomeranz in round 15 and Mark Melancon in round 17, if somewhere in there you have the Padres saves, then you're good. You got 2 closers, right? And you can roll from there.
And Padres saves would be really good to have, you would think, too.
They should be great.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
thought the funniest thing I thought when I first looked at your team was last year you took Emilio Pagan in our LABR draft and he burned you by losing his closer's role. Wouldn't it be ironic if this year you took everybody but him in the
right,
and then he burned you by getting the closer's role? But you should be fine.
Yeah, nothing wrong could possibly happen with that. It's totally fine. I took a couple of stabs late to Stephen Crichton, and we're done. Actually, I haven't thrown it in there, but I also in the very last round got Tyler Clippard as well. So I have 2/3 of the shots at Arizona's closing job, albeit probably the second and third choices. But again, we're drafting early March. There'll be a fab period, and the great thing about those picks is easy cuts if they don't get it. But I might have a closer, and then and if not, move on. Also, Brian Garcia took a stab at the Tigers closing job too.
Okay.
Soto was late to report. Jimenez was terrible last year. There's like 4 guys that could get it there in Detroit, and they're Detroit saves, so that it might not even be that great. But at least I'm in on a couple of those guys. I like the build. I feel though, being at the end is tough. I'd rather be in the middle. I don't like being at the end.
I get it. So I like Acuna a lot. So the fact that you were able to get him picking second, I love.
That's the obvious payoff. Yeah.
If I'm setting my KDS, I'm putting pick 1 and I'm taking Acuna. That's just me. I get that a lot of people would take Soto now. I'm seeing Soto go first or go for the most in some of the auctions in LABR on the weekend and things like that. So I get it. But I think this year being in the middle is great. Like when you look at your draft and you see 2, 4, 6 picks in, you can get DeGrom, 8 picks in, you can get Trey Turner, 9 picks in, you can get Garrett Cole.
At least you could in this one. That's a windfall. And by the way, that's Ariel Cohen that got him at 9.
Right.
Makes me sick. But anyways,
so even if you flip, even if you flip, so Shane Bieber, I wouldn't say reach. Shane Bieber was unreal last year. Like someone took Shane Bieber at 7. There are smart people out there who like Shane Bieber as much as DeGrom and Cole right now, and that's fine. Even if you flip Cole and Bieber, you're still sitting around 6, 7, 8. You got DeGrom, you got Cole, you got Trey Turner, you got Bieber if he's your guy at 9. Like I think you're right. I think this year sitting in the middle is awesome, and then you don't miss out on runs, which helps you with that starting pitcher pool, like you said, with having to consider Woodruff because you didn't know what would be there when it came back to you. It helps you with the closer runs. It could help you with steals runs, which is kind of a bit of a thing sometimes in the first few rounds this year. So I agree. I haven't for my league that'll be the most important to me so far. I haven't set my KDS yet, but I will be torn. I will probably put 1 number 1, but after that I might have some of the middle spots.
Yeah, for the main event, I'm gonna go like 8, 9, 7, 6. I might not choose the first or second slot because I don't see much separation between Acuna, Tatis, Betts, and Soto. I think I maybe go all the way down to 4 and then kind of go from there.
Right.
We'll see.
Right. But you would still go 8 before 4. Is that right?
I think about it because
4 is not bad. Like you're not
right.
You're getting close to the middle now. Like you won't at 4 you will not miss out on the whole. It'd be highly unlikely you miss out on the whole starting pitcher run in round 2.
It's more later in the draft when you're forced to like reach on your guys a little bit more. Is there 6?
Right.
Yeah, because there's 16 picks between when you're going in the odd rounds. There's 16 picks before your between your 2 point let's say 7.4 and 8.9. There's 16 picks there. That's still a lot. Closer runs can happen within 16 picks.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you're never, no matter where you're picking, you're never really closer run proof because a closer run consists of 4 or 5 guys. So
that's also true.
So that can happen really. You could be picked 11 and they go down through the end turn and all of a sudden, someone double taps them, a couple other guys grab one and you're like, oh man, what, I had all these closers and they never went back. But I mean, just playing the odds. Yeah. I could see that. I think I would be off the top of my head. I think I'll be 1, but then I might be something like 8 working my way back to 2.
Okay. Yeah. Throwing a couple more things out here and then we'll move on. It's onto the NL West. The concept of value picks, taking guys that you might not be in love with, but man, they drop. Sometimes they drop for a reason, whether it's injuries or playing time concerns. Sometimes they just drop. How are you on taking those guys? I'll give you my examples. It was Bregman in the 4th. We talked about him already. Dylan Moore at 11-2. Don't love him, and we've talked about him before, but I think his max ADP was like 154, and I got him at 152. I just, getting a stolen base source, it's multi-position guy. It's like, okay, it might not work. He might hit 220 and lose his job, but he might steal 30 also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you needed a little bit of speed, I think, still at that point. Like
I'd agree with that.
Swanson's can be a 10 steal guy, but you needed someone maybe to complement Acuna a little bit. So when you took Moore, like assuming you were using like the RotoWire draft software, was Moore the highest ranked guy left?
Of them, among them, I forget exactly who was there at the time, but certainly among among those, a category that I needed, a position I needed. Yeah, that worked. That was like
one. It's easy in TGFBI because it's a slow draft. In regular drafts where you have a minute or a minute and a half to make your pick, one of the strangest feelings is when someone drops weirdly and all of a sudden you're staring down someone who you thought there was no chance that you were going to take. And you're like, why is this guy still left? And then you start second guessing yourself and you're like, wait, what do they know that I don't? And, and you're quickly, is there any news here with this guy? Or just beyond that, like, what does this room know about this guy? Like why is he still here? But you only have a minute to a minute and a half to really decide, like, am I really going to take this guy? But he was way off. Like Moore, we talked about Dylan Moore last week when we did the AL West, and you were like, no, I don't like him. Like around his ADP, I don't like him.
Right.
And then it's funny, like the next day you drafted him because he fell. I find that in a slow draft, you can just read a little bit, think about it a bit, and go ahead and make the pick. But in a real draft, that's a tricky one, because you do. I find I do. I start second guessing myself.
Yeah, I definitely did. I'll tell you my real second guess in this draft. The one I regret. Zach Plesac fell in my draft. Okay. And we've talked about him a little bit. And he's not a top 60 guy. Well, guess what? I had a shot at him at pick 89. Decided I wanted to get the bat first, and if he'd come back, I'd get him. So, of course, he goes in the turn. I took Lourdes Gurriel instead of Plesac. I think if I had done it, I think that's the one I'd redo. That'd be my redo. I would take Plesac and take whichever bat of those two that I get between Gurriel and Swanson. Gurriel will address batting average for me. I wanted pieces of that Toronto offense. All that is true, and maybe a little bit of speed. Not a lot, but some. Non-zero speed. And I think that's important this year. But I'll tell you what. Going Kershaw, Woodruff, Plesac instead of Kershaw, Woodruff, Alcantara, Eflin, I think I would have rather done that and then taken a hitter in 9 or 10 instead of the way I'd built it. I think that's the one draft regret I have right now.
Yeah, I could see that. You could have taken Plesac and then you could either skipped Alcantara and like some of the hitters who went after him. I don't know if you'd be a Gallo guy, but Alex Baum or Mon Laureano, I see some Matt Chapman might have been on your radar then, and Chris Bryant, who I know you have, like you took in LABR. He was one pick away from getting to you in round 10.
I would have taken him, but I already had a third baseman at the time, so and a first baseman, so I would have been locking a corner. I would have had the corners controlled in after 10 rounds. Andy Behrens would have been proud of me. But I did have him controlled after 13 with CJ Crone anyhow. So we'll see. But
I could see that though. Instead of taking Eflin, maybe you if you had Plesac, you don't have Gurriel, but you got Plesac, you don't have Eflin, and maybe you take Dylan Carlson or someone like that who went, Michael Brantley, someone who went in those next few picks.
Yeah, and I do like Eflin though. I have him in a few places, but you're right. It would have been a different build, and I think it may have been better. Who knows? And maybe I would have been more comfortable taking a closer than early too. I could have done that as well. So there were different builds. I thought that was one of those demarcation points. Was like, if I'd done it that way, this draft would have ended a little differently. I like the team as a whole. If I don't, then I'm screwed, right? But at the same time, it was harder. I will say that. And I'd rather have my drafts be easier. Maybe sometimes that's a function of 15s, function of people in the league. There's a lot of people I've played against before that, quote unquote names, whether it's Ariel, whether it's Justin Mason, Dan Strafford's in this league. There's a lot of good players in this league. Ian Kahn's in this league. Kerry Klug from Rasball's in there too. So a lot of good players that I'd played against before. A few other, players that I hadn't played against before that seemed like they knew what they were doing too. So, that's the way it should be. It's an industry league. Every once in a while you get some outliers here and there, but it felt pretty tough.
Yeah, like you said, that's the way these industry leagues should be, and that's what makes them worth the ADP data which I think is amazing for the industry in general. The ADP data, that's something you can get from TGFBI and the competition. It's awesome.
Before we get to the NL West, quick note from our friends at Otternew. Otternew Fantasy Baseball is the next level fantasy baseball challenge you've been looking for. Experience a year-round dynasty competition with deep rosters, accumulate prospects to lead your team in the future, or to move for a superstar at the trade deadline. Keep your baseball mind engaged in the offseason with trades and arbitration. Learn more about why everyone who plays Otternew becomes addicted at OtterNewBaseball.com. That's OTT as in Tom, ONEU baseball.com. Otternew, better fantasy baseball.
Please like our video and subscribe to RotoWire. Then go to rotowire.com/pod for a free 10-day trial.